Point one. So, as I asked earlier, are you aware of a project addressing human rights abuses of remand prisoners with special emphasis on domestic violence murder cases? This is an opportunity for us to find out more. Joining me this morning, Professor Rosemary Bell Antoine of the University of the West Indies, Pro Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies and Research, as well as Project Lead. Good morning to you, Professor. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, and to you and to all our viewers, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to inform the public about this important project.
All right, it is important because I don't think a lot of people really understand remand and remand justice. So my understanding, which is basic, that remand is a form of detention for a crime, and you have not yet been tried for. Am I right?
Yes, and that is the key point, because I think people assume that once you're in jail, incarcerated, that you're somehow guilty, but that is not the case. You're arrested on suspicion of a crime, and you're placed on remand, and that means you have had no bail. And in Trinidad and Tobago, until recently, that court judgment we had recently changed it, but you could not get bail if you were accused of murder. So whether you are innocent or guilty, you are placed in jail awaiting your trial. So all of the people we are talking about are to be presumed innocent under our legal system. Yes.
All right. So when we talk about human rights abuses, just to but before we get into that, what's the longest someone has been in remand in Trinidad and Tobago?
21, well, it's more than 21 years now, because when we started the project 3 years or 4 years ago, it was in fact, we had someone who was there 21 years, and I'm certain they have not been released. And there are other instances like that. And you know what is so unfortunate, and I think the public needs to understand, Trinidad and Tobago has the worst record for remand in terms of the length of time. And that is what we are focusing on. Yes, you must place people on remand. You must have a remand system. But we should have a legal system and a justice system that ensures that people are brought to trial quickly. And we've had cases, I'm sure you recall, over the years, we've had cases where people have spent 10, 12, 15 years on remand, and then they were innocent. Young people, young men usually. And so they wasted all of this time in jail for no reason at all, because the system is just too slow. And we are saying the system, because of this inordinate delay, is unjust. That is the main thing. That is where the human rights violation comes in.
But why? Why is it that the wheels are not moving?
Yes, and you would have heard even the Prime Minister. I was so glad when I heard him speak what day it was, when he was quite exasperated. He said he can't understand. It's a number of reasons. One, of course, is the judicial system, the arrangements, the judges, and so forth. But it's also the attorneys. I think we all have a part to play in that. It's when and how we prosecute. It's a whole host of factors. And the important thing about this project is that we've actually launched a constitutional challenge. Obviously, I can't speak about it. It's sub judice, but we, in November 2020, we filed a constitutional motion. It was reported in the press, where we are actually challenging, saying this is unconstitutional. But apart from that litigation, the project involves, a whole host of things. Advocacy. We want to bring life skills to remandees, because one of the things we realize is that if you're on remand, unlike if you're convicted, you're not entitled to any of the remedial rehabilitative measures, like say education and so, which is so ironic, because you are the innocent one and you can't. So the system is not there. But the reasons are, and we're going to have Sophia Short, the president of the Law Association, in a seminar we're having tomorrow at 4:00, which I hope the public will register for. One of their speakers would be the president of the Law Association. She can speak to the attorney's perspective, because some of the delays actually come from attorneys asking for too many adjournments, and so some of it is, as I said, the judges, and so on. There are a whole host of factors, but I think people have just accepted this, that nobody cares, so they become complacent, and so who suffers? Of course, it's a person on remand and their families. They are the ones who suffer.
And that's what I was going to ask next. I mean, what happens to a remandee? Okay, so a person is in remand. What is happening while that person is incarcerated?
Nothing. This is the tragedy of it all, because we brought this to the Inter-American Human Rights Commission in Washington 3 years ago in 2019, well, almost 4 now. And that was, we had the former commissioner of prisons, Mr. Gerald Wilson, who is also going to be speaking tomorrow at our webinar at 4 o'clock. He has been one of the champions. You know, it's not because someone is a prison officer that they're not sympathetic. In fact, our statistics come from them, and they are the ones who have statistics as the amount of women in there, which is an emphasis on the project too, who have been trying for murder, who are being accused of murder, and were victims of domestic violence, and they're still there on remand, forgotten in the system. And one of the things he told us, because I was not even aware of that, is because of the way the rules are in the prison system. When you're on remand, there's nothing put in place. So you sit there vegetating. You're not entitled to all of the education classes, all the life skills, which is why our project is trying to emphasize that. You come out of remand, hopefully, at some point, if even if you're acquitted or if you spent your time and so, and there's nothing in place for you either. You don't get compensated. That's out of the question. You probably can't get a job because people are say when you went to prison, nobody cares whether you were guilty or not. They just know you were in jail in Orange Grove for how many years, you know, and you're just left there. It is really a tragedy happening in our midst, and nobody seems to care. So there are a whole host of, but the system is not in place to treat a person's or remand, because it is presumed that remand is a temporary thing. But it has become, it is no longer temporary. It has become almost permanent. If you could be there 21 years and more,
Yes.
that is not a temporary fix.
And I was curious about that, the emphasis on domestic violence
Yes.
murder cases.
And this was quite by accident. I took my students, I was Dean of Law at the time, and I took my students because we have an international human rights clinic which is driving this. And I must mention the EU, by the way. The EU is funding this project, and they've helped us a lot in the past. And we went to the prisons to look at remand generally, and quite by accident, because they separated the women with the men. When we began speaking to the women, and we asked them, why are you here? Almost all of them were there something to do with domestic violence, and their partner ended up dead. They were defending themselves, but they had no way, they had not ever gotten to the court to explain this, and they were charged for full murder instead of being charged, let us say, self-defense. And that's another thing I think we need to fix. How we charge, how we prosecute that. So this, and when I inquired of the prison officers, credit to them, I give credit to them that they actually had noticed this, and they had statistics to tell us, you know, how many women were there. So it is very interesting, and another silent issue. And when I did some more research all over the world, there's a pattern. There's actually a pattern all over the world with women who are accused of murder, and actually it is self-defense, but sometimes it gets out in court, sometimes it doesn't, depending on, you know, your lawyer, etc., etc. But the whole is almost like a double jeopardy that's happening there. So that is an interesting angle. And given the high incidence of domestic violence we have in Trinidad and Tobago, I think it is something that we really should pay close attention to.
So we're addressing the human rights abuses of remand prisoners, and that is the emphasis here, with emphasis, of course, on domestic violence murder cases. But it's not just about the prisoners, because we also forget that they have families, and they are also facing, they have no closure.
Exactly. And you know, that's one of the things we highlighted when we went before the American Commission on Human Rights. And one of my speakers, who's a former student, an attorney now, Janelle Caraspi, will be talking about that aspect, the family life impact. As you know, it's not just murder, but although our project is to convenient and murder, you could be in remand, especially before we changed the law recently, for smoking a spliff, you know, a marijuana joint, whatever. They throw you in jail, and you're waiting long time, and your family, you know, the family suffer. When it's a woman, sometimes it's worse that it's a woman in jail, because we know we have matriarchal societies where it's the woman who's taking care of the children, the woman who's the breadwinner. So your whole family is prejudiced because of this one person, this one parent in jail. And you also know that we don't have social welfare in this country. We just don't. So you begin to see the vicious cycle. You know, it is not just about the prison. It's just about the whole social system, the way society works, doesn't work, as the case may be.
How How many are currently in remand in Trinidad?
It was over when we got the statistics 3-4 years ago. It was over 21,000, and I think that number has grown. It's difficult to know. I don't have recent statistics since then, and then the COVID complicated
Yeah.
matters. But also, we have a new phenomenon, which is something we've also interrogated at the Faculty of Law when I was there, which is the migrants. We began to put migrants in remand. So, so that was another, that sort of complicates matters as well. And one is not even too sure where that is, because for a while we weren't even allowed to go to the prisons because of the COVID, even if you're the attorney, and a whole host of complications. So I suspect that number has grown. It hasn't declined. There was a move to, if you recall, the Attorney General had tried to bring forward those cases and to release, but I don't think it was brought to fruition. Remember, there was some initiative when COVID started.
Yeah.
People on remand. Yeah. So it's difficult to know, but I suspect it has grown rather than declined. But what I can tell you, we have the most in the entire Caribbean still, and that is not something we should be proud of.
No, we should not be proud of that at all, but it is a crisis. It can be defined as a crisis. So it calls for great attention, which is the purpose of having this project. So tell us about the launch details. So this happens tomorrow?
Yes, tomorrow at 4 p.m. It's a webinar. You have to register for it. So if you just clicking University of the West Indies, remand, you should get the link and so on. So just simply go online, register. It's free, of course. Anybody can register. We have a Facebook, the UWI page. We'll have it on as well. So just go on and listen and hopefully learn a lot and become part of the movement. And I should also recognize, this is not against the government or anything. This is the state of Trinidad and Tobago that is at fault here. So the litigation is against the state. We do acknowledge, and we must be responsible to acknowledge, that the Honorable Chief Justice has launched a program a few years ago to try to ease that situation of people, the backlog of cases. But what we are saying, that we need to do a lot more. We've only had a drop in the bucket. So I hope people will come out tomorrow and participate in the webinar. UWI, University of West Indies St. Augustine, Facebook page, Google page, and you can just register.
And this happens at 4 in the afternoon, 4 to 6:30?
Yes, 4 to 6:30.
You just want to share with us the guests, your panel who'd be present?
Yes, that's a good idea. So I mentioned Ms. Sophia Choate, SC, who is the president of the Law Association. We also have former Commissioner of Police, who's a champion in this area, Mr. Gerard Wilson. We have also award-winning journalist Deborah Jacob, who's a lot in the prisons, and she's spoken with us before. She's worked with us before. We have Mr. David Mohammed. I'm sure you know he's an advocate, activist. I myself will say a few words. And we will have remanding Mr. Ali, someone who was Nicholas Ali on remand for many years and was found to be innocent. He will also be speaking tomorrow. So we have and I mentioned also my former student, now attorney, Ms. Janelle Caraspi, will also be on the panel. So a fantastic panel, I think. It will be very interesting, very dynamic. So I encourage people to tune in.
All right. So this is a webinar and it happens tomorrow, addressing human rights abuses for remand prisoners with special emphasis on domestic violence murder cases. It's in the afternoon, 4 to 6:30. Registration is free, so you can register and we're allowed to participate.
Yes, you can ask questions, etc. It's a Zoom sort of format.
All right. Thank you so much. This is great information, and we hope to follow up because we'd love to know the outcome of the launch, because this is one step closer. And this is ongoing work. So keep us in the loop, Professor Rosemary Bell Antoine, University of the West Indies, Pro Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies and Research, and project lead for this project addressing human rights abuses of remand prisoners with special emphasis on domestic violence murder cases. A pleasure to chat with you.
The pleasure was mine, and thank you again so much. You have a great day, you and your listeners.
Same to you, and best of luck tomorrow and on this project. Stay tuned to 103.1. We are